Hello, hockey fans, and welcome to another numbers video. And we're looking at the fourth player I covered on this channel, Montreal Canadiens icon and Hall of Famer, the one and only Guy Lafleur. He spent the majority of his career dominant with the Montreal Canadiens, playing from the 1971-72 season to 1983-84. After a controversial retirement where it seemed like he was forced out of the game by coach and former teammate Jacques Lemaire, he was inducted into the Hockey Hall of Fame in 1988, his first year of eligibility. And then he played a season with the Rangers in 88-89 and 2 seasons for the Quebec Nordiques before retiring for good in 1991. Pure finesse, speed, grace, uncanny skill, creativity. He could go right in on goal and make that fancy move, or he'd just use that tremendous shot and release from any point. Also an incredible passer and setup man. He truly had everything that coaches and general managers look for in a generational talent. Sam Pollock saw it years ahead. He amassed 560 career goals, 793 assists for 1,353 points in 1,126 games. Truly incredible. A collector of many awards, and above all, not one, not two, not three, not even four, but 5 Stanley Cup rings, which of course includes that infamous 4 in a row, which he was arguably the best and primary part of from 1976 to 79. Now let's get right to it and look at some of his accomplishments. On March 4th, 1981, in a game against the lowly Winnipeg Jets at the Montreal Forum, Guy Lafleur went into the game with 997 career points. 4:01 in, he set up center and sometimes limey Pierre LaRouche for a goal to open up the scoring. Just over 4.5 minutes later, Keith Acton and Yvon Lambert set up Lafleur for his 20th goal that season, giving him point number 999. Later in the game, the Habs were dominating 8-0 going into the third period. When Larry Robinson took the puck out of the zone, began a rush like he expertly does, sees Keith Acton, who sets up Guy Lafleur for the goal, and career point number 1,000. Lafleur was just the 14th player to reach the milestone at the time in NHL history, and the third to do so entirely in a Habs uniform, with Jean Beliveau and Henri Richard being the prior two. Lafleur also did so in 720 games, which at the time was an NHL record, beating Marcel Dion, who said it was 740 earlier that same season. His first point came in his first career game on October 9, 1971 against the New York Rangers, also at the Forum, assisting on a Yvan Cournoyer goal. While his mark of fastest game has since been passed, out of the 100 players to reach 1,000 points, Lafleur still sits at 7th fastest to reach the milestone as of 2025, showing just how much he dominated the game in his era as one of the best of all time. Guy's next milestone came on December 20th, 1983, as the Canadiens traveled to face the New Jersey Devils. At 8:34 into the third period, longtime teammate Bob Gainey began to play the lead of the stick of Pierre Mondu, who sets up Guy Lafleur, who parks it past Chico Resch for his 500th career NHL goal. At the time, just the 10th player in NHL history to reach the mark, and the third to do so entirely in a Habs uniform. The first being the very first man to reach 500 goals, Rocket Richard, and Jean Beliveau was the other. Lafleur's first goal was scored on October 23rd, 1971, set up by All-Star defenseman J.C. Tremblay, and was scored on Gary Edwards of the LA Kings. Lafleur had played 961 games this time of his abrupt retirement, so it wasn't until his comeback in the 88-89 season while with the New York Rangers, he played in his 1,000th career game, which took place at Madison Square Garden on January 30th, 1989, in a 7-3 win at home against their hated rivals, the New York Islanders, and Lafleur had an assist in the victory. When Lafleur retired in 1991, he was the NHL's 5th all-time leading point scorer, and now sits at 31st as of 2025-26. He was the 6th all-time leading scorer, and now sits at 29th. Lafleur led the league in points for 3 straight seasons. The first was the 75-76 season with his 56 goals, 69 assists for 125 points, 6 ahead of fellow Hall of Famer Bobby Clarke of the Philadelphia Flyers. Teammate and limey Pete Mahovlich was 7th best in the league. Lafleur became the first Habs player since Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion in 1961, and the 4th player in Habs history to win the Art Ross Trophy for the league scoring title since it was introduced in 1947-48. During the Habs' historic 60-win, 8-loss, and 12-tie season for 132 points, Lafleur had a year for the ages. 56 goals, 80 assists for 136 points, far ahead of Marcel Dion, his fellow 1971 draft alum and Hall of Famer, who had 122. Teammate and line mate Steve Shutt was 3rd with 105. Then in 1977-78, another historic Habs season, Lafleur notched a monster career-high 60 goals, adding 72 assists for 132 points, 9 ahead of Islanders megastar future Hall of Famer Brian Trottier. teammate and line mate Jacques Lemaire was in fourth with 97 points, and out of these 11 players, 9 are in the Hall of Fame. Oddly enough, you wouldn't think so, but Lafleur only led the league in goals once, and that was during the time that he scored that 60 in 77-78. Just 7 ahead of rookie sensation and future Hall of Famer Mike Bossy of the Islanders. Teammate Schutt was in third with 49 that season. Lafleur also led the league in assists once. He did that the season prior to the 76-77 with a monster 80 apples to his credit. Teammate and defenseman Larry Robinson, who also had an epic season, notched 66 helpers. In the 1979-80 season, Guy Lafleur at the time tied an NHL record with his 6th consecutive 100-point season. He tied legendary defenseman Bobby Orr, Mike Bossy, Peter Stastny, Steve Yzerman, and a kid who idolized Guy, Mario Lemieux, have all tied the mark. And as of the recording of this video, Connor McDavid, coming back from the Olympic break, is just 4 points away from reaching 6 straight himself. Barring injury, he should equal that mark. Of course, Gretzky holds the all-time record with 13. That same season, he set an NHL record for 50 goal seasons consecutively with 6, beating Phil Esposito's record of 5. Since then, he has been passed by both Gretzky and the current record holder, Mike Bossy. Still impressive that Lafleur, however, sits third best all-time for that mark. Now let's take a look at some of the other categories Lafleur led the league in. Twice, Lafleur led the league in even strength goals. The first time was in his breakout season in 74-75, which was his 4th NHL season, and that is where he emerged as a superstar. He had 36 total 5-on-5 markers, just 3 ahead of Flyers All-Star Reggie Leach and Eric Vale of the Atlanta Flames. And the next time would be in his historic 77-78 season, where he notched 45 even markers out of the 60 goals he scored that year. And this time he was far ahead of the margin, 9 ahead of Leafs superstar Lanny McDonald and Bruins forward Pete McNabb with 36. Teammate Steve Schutt had 33, coming in 6th, while other teammates Jacques Lemaire had 30 in a 4-way tie for 9th. Lafleur's abilities in the clutch, however, is something that often gets overlooked. Sure, he's always remembered for that late tying goal in the 1979 semifinal against the Bruins, but he knew when to score at important times, too, during the regular season, as he led the league in game-winning goals 4 times. The first time was in 74-75 with 11 winners, just 1 ahead of Reggie Leach that season. Lemaire was tied for 5th with 8. He did so again the very next year, this time with 12 game winners. But this time he was tied for first with teammate and fellow Hall of Famer Yvan Cournoyer, just 1 ahead of Reggie Leach. After finishing 3rd the following year, Lafleur finished first again in the 77-78 season, again with 12, but this time 3 ahead of Flyers legend and Hall of Famer Bill Barber. Schutt is again in the top 10 in a 4-way tie for 7th, while Cournoyer was in a 9-way tie for 9th. And the 4th and final time he led the league in that category was the 78-79 season, this time with a career best, 13. 4 ahead of Mike Bossy's 9 that season. Teammates Yvon Lambert and Pierre Mondu were in a 6-way tie for 6th with 7. I should note that Lafleur's 98 career game winners as of February 2026 are 12th all-time in NHL history. Lafleur led the league in plus-minus once in the 77-78 season, with a massive plus 73, just 2 ahead of teammate Larry Robinson. List dominated by Habs players this season. Hall of Famer Serge Savard with a plus 62 and 5th. Defenseman Bill Nyrup and Steve Schutt tied for 7th with a plus 56. Lemaire in 9th with a plus 54. This team is just ridiculous. Lafleur's career plus-minus is a massive plus 446, which is 11th all-time in NHL history as of February 2026. Lafleur led the league in total goals on ice for once, and that was during the 79-80 season with a total of 187. Just barely 3 above the NHL scoring champion that year, Marcel Dion. Larry Robinson is in 4th with 173. Steve Schutt tied for 8th with 149. And for 3 straight seasons, he led the league in offensive point shares. And I'm sure you can almost guess by now which seasons those were. First, of course, was 75-76, as his 11.1 was pretty dominant over Penguin star forward and future Habs teammate and line mate Pierre LaRouche. And second, the 9.8. 8 out of 10 on this list, Hall of Famers. The following season, he dominated again with a 12.7 ahead of Marcel Dion's 11.3, while teammate Steve Schutt finished 3rd and Larry Robinson was 9th. 8 out of 10 Hall of Famers in this list as well. And again, he led the category in 1977-78 with an even bigger number of 13.1, far ahead of Brian Trotier's 2nd with 10.7. Steve Schutt and Jacques Lemaire finished 6th and 7th with an 8.2. 9 out of 10 Hall of Famers here. And now we're going to take a look at who helped the flower bloom in his career. Who set up Guy the most for his 560 goals? Well, that would be Steve Shutt. Lafleur's partner in crime set him up a monster 109 times over the 12 full and parts of a 13 season they played alongside each other in Montreal. And one time they were the most unstoppable duo of wingers in the entire league. And that number is literally over a fifth of the goals Lafleur scored with Montreal, 21%. As a matter of fact, that is ridiculous. The ultimate setup man among defensemen in his era was Larry Robinson, tremendous at starting rushes and helping out his fellow forwards, and Lafleur, of course, was no different. He set up Lafleur for 82 goals. The two played together for 12 full seasons and a small part of a 13th. One of the men who changed the trajectory of Lafleur's career, which took a few years to take off, was Peter Mahovlich, the centerman and playmaker who could read Guy like a book and knew when and how efficiently to feed him the puck. Even with Lafleur's decent first few seasons, Pete was a big help, setting him up 78 times total the whole time they played together, which was 6 full seasons and parts of a 7th. Jacques Lemaire, along with Lafleur, were the ultimate clutch combo, and were teammates for 8 seasons, but it was actually more so during Lemaire's final 3 seasons with the Habs that the two were lined together more often and gelled the best. Lemaire set up Guy 66 times overall. And lastly, and certainly not least, another playmaking defenseman who was always dangerous from the point in the offensive rush zone, and that was Guy Lapointe. He set up Lafleur 56 times and was a key factor on their power play, and the two played 10 full seasons and parts of an 11 together. And who did Lafleur return the favor to the most? He, after all, had 793 assists. To the shock of literally nobody, he set up Steve Shutt 187 times. Literally, 45.8% of the goals that Shutt scored in Montreal. Not far from half. Oh man, these two were so important to one another. Shutt's career also got off to a bit of a slow start before he really took off. These two made each other into Hall of Famers. At a very distant second, however, is Jacques Lemaire, who's on the receiving end of 61 setups from our hero. Peter Mahovlich got plenty in return from Lafleur, being set up for 44 goals. And next, despite only playing 5 seasons together, just 3 of them full seasons, and just 2 with this man being part of the regular lineup, Lafleur set up Pierre LaRouche, who they traded Mahovlich for 38 times. These two were unstoppable for us in the 79-80 and 80-81 seasons specifically. Coming in top are the 2 Hall of Fame defensemen, Guy Lapointe and Larry Robinson, each receiving 37 setups goals by the Flower. That's more than a fit, just about 22% of Lapointe's goals as a Hab, and close to 19% of Robinson's. But who did the Flower team up with to set up the goals with the most? Well, Steve Shutt makes the clean sweep at first, helping Lafleur help others 72 times. At a fairly close second, however, Larry Robinson's rushes often began with passes to Lafleur, who feed it to others, and the two teamed up for 65 apples. Guy Lapointe was also key on teaming up with Lafleur with huge setups of 53. Pete Mahovlich teamed up with Guy 48 times for assists, and Jacques Lemaire just one back and forth in 5th with 47. And of course, with 560 goals, you're gonna have a lot of goalie victims. 125 to be exact, and only 3 empty net goals in his great career. And the man who the Flower fired in on the most successfully was Hall of Famer, former Vezina winner, 2-time second-team All-Star, and 2-time Hart Trophy MVP finalist, Rogy Vachon. Lafleur just always had his fellow Quebecois number and scored a monster 31 goals on him. Beat his All-Star years in LA, his bad days in Detroit, and so-so days, final days in Boston. Lafleur always got the better of him. Second was another fellow Quebecois hockey player, Dan Bouchard. A huge 29 times, and Bouchard actually was one of the better goalies of the era, but he was no match for the Flower. In a tie, we have one of the all-time greats in Hall of Famer Tony Esposito, as Lafleur always played well against the Blackhawks, no matter how good, bad, or in the middle Chicago was. Tony O let in 23 goals. Also line 23, the first whipping boy on this list, poor Jim Rutherford, backstopper for the dead thing Red Wings in this era. Gilles Melange allowed the 5th most with 19 Lafleur goals. He was actually a really good goalie at times in his career. He spent much of it, however, playing for the lowly California Seals/Cleveland Barons. 6th was Gilles Gilbert. The Bruins goalie himself was often very good, even excellent. But Lafleur's success against Boston wasn't limited to the playoffs. He scored on Gilbert 17 times. And there's a tie for 7th, allowing 15 goals. First, we have our next whipping boy, and poor Ron Lowe. He's still playing for the Caps and Red Wings in the 70s. He also played for the Devils in the 80s. Ouch. Tied with him is Gary Smith, again, who at times could actually be a very good goaltender, but was also on some very bad teams. Whipping boy Michel Placé, who's actually Lafleur's teammate in Montreal for a couple seasons, allowed 14 goals. Rounding up the top 10 is Greg Millen with 12, who Lafleur even got the better of in his less dominant days. Poor Millen was both a whipping boy and at times very talented. He always just seemed to have bad luck with the teams he ended up on. Quite an eclectic mix of great, good, bad, and mediocre. Lafleur entered the NHL in the 1971-72 season when the league was just 14 teams strong. By the time he retired early in the 84-85 season, it was a 21-team league, and it was the same during his final retirement in 1991, just before expansion was about to take off. However, he played against 22 total, including the defunct California Seals / Cleveland Barons. He scored a goal on every single team, and the two teams he scored on the most was the Detroit Dead Thing Red Wings and Pittsburgh Penguins, who were the constant whipping boys for star players in this era. He always played well against the LA Kings, again, laying in a Rogie Vachon being his primary target, having notched 42 goals. And Lafleur got the better of hated rivals, the Boston Bruins, 34 times, considering the Bruins were pretty much the second best team in Lafleur's NHL heyday. That says a lot. But on the other end of the spectrum, the woeful Capitals of that era were also the target of every star player, and Lafleur was no different, hitting 34 markers on them. He always played great against the Blackhawks with 32 goals on them. Another rival and great team of that era, the Philadelphia Flyers. The Flower got to them 31 times, very impressive against a very good team who always had tremendous goaltending. The mediocre and sometimes downright awful Canucks allowed 31 Lafleur goals as well. The St. Louis Blues allowed 30 from the Flower. There was a tie of 29, the usually very good and consistent Buffalo Sabres, and the not-so-good, yet later pretty good, Minnesota North Stars. Another hated rival of the Habs, the sometimes good, sometimes mediocre, and sometimes outright awful Maple Leafs allowed 27. The Atlanta Flames, who of course later moved to Calgary, certainly didn't like facing Lafleur. Just ask Dan Bouchard, as he notched 25 goals against them total. The Colorado Rockies, who were of course the Kansas City Scuds before that, and the New Jersey Devils after that, and they became that towards the end of Guy's first retirement, allowed 20 goals, which is surprisingly low considering how bad they were. Same goes with the defunct Seals / Barons, who allowed 19. Lafleur, however, did have great fortune against the lowly Whalers, easy for me to say, once they entered the NHL in the 79-80 season, as their division rivalry brewed forward, and he scored 18 goals on them. He did have a struggle against the New York teams a little bit, as he just scored 17 on the Rangers, who were maybe decent at best a few times during Lafleur's career, and even a couple times really good. But the emergence of the Islanders was ever present, as Guy only scored 16 on them. However, he thrived. The Habs' newest rivals in the 1980s, the Battle of Quebec, the Nordiques, scoring 13 goals on their new hated rivals. The Nordiques continued to make life hell for Dan Bouchard when he was there. The Jets, who Guy only played against 21 times in his career, still allowed 12 of his goals. And even against the team where all but 42 of his career goals came with, the Habs allowed 5 goals to Lafleur. He had great fortune against them, especially in his first season back in the NHL as a member of the Rangers. While he did have some struggles against other teams, the only one I think he truly struggled bad against in his entire career was the Edmonton Oilers, only scoring 4 goals in them and in just general never really played that well against them. Be that as it may, double digits on 20 of 22 teams. That is crazy amazing and really shows another level of consistency. Lafleur's play during the Habs' run of 4 straight Stanley Cups from 76 to 79 was nothing short of magnificent and downright brilliant. In total, he played 128 playoff games and scored a huge 134 points. He only missed the playoffs twice in his career, and that was his final 2 seasons in the league with the Quebec Nordiques, who were pretty horrible. He had a flair for the pressure cooker that is the Stanley Cup playoffs. He finished 3rd in playoff scoring in 1976. But for the 1977 playoffs, capping off what was pretty much the perfect year for himself and his team, he led with a massive 26 points in just 14 playoff games, which included a beautiful assist to Jacques Lemaire's OT winner to win the Stanley Cup and a sweep over the Bruins. 9 goals, 17 assists total. He was awarded the Conn Smythe Trophy, playoff MVP this year. Impressive list, however, overall in these playoffs with 7 Hall of Famers. He finished first again in the 78 playoffs, scoring 10 goals and 11 assists this time for 21 points in 15 games. And his point total was indeed tied with teammate and that year's Conn Smythe Trophy winner, defenseman and playoff MVP, Larry Robinson. For the 3rd straight year, he tied the league again, points with teammate Jacques Lemaire with 23 in 16 games. Lafleur had 10 goals, 13 assists for 23 points. And the fact that he and Lemaire were truly a combo force to be reckoned with, as this was the year the Habs dynasty was nearly a minute away from ending the semifinal playoff series against the Boston Bruins, when Lafleur, Came into the Bruins zone on a power play at a little bit of a slower pace than usual, but it was very strategic. Passing up to Lemaire, who left it for Lafleur. Just past the blue line, launched it past goaltender Gilles Gilbert, picking the perfect spot from a distance to send the game into overtime, which the Habs eventually won. It's considered arguably the greatest and most celebrated goal and most replayed in Habs history. Guy Lafleur represented Team Canada 3 times, playing 7 games in each tournament. Winning the first ever Canada Cup in 1976 with 6 points in 7 games, playing pretty well overall. He represented Team Canada at the 1981 World Championships in Sweden, but the team finished a disappointing 4th and Guy actually didn't play that well. A few months later at the 81 Canada Cup, he played much better, with 11 points in 7 games, tied for 2nd overall in the tournament, scoring along with Islanders Brian Trottier and Mike Bossy, and just one behind leader Wayne Gretzky. However, Canada would lose to the Soviets in a crushing final. Now let's look at his all-time franchise marks. Guy Lafleur is the all-time leading scorer in Montreal Canadiens history with a total of 1,246 points, 27 ahead of his idol Jean Béliveau. His former teammate Henri Richard is 3rd with 1,046, while the great Rocket Richard still sits at 4th all-time, and in 5th is one of Guy's main collaborators, defenseman Larry Robinson with 883. No active Habs players even close to any of these marks. But with the emergence of stars like Cole Caulfield and Nick Suzuki, if they stay in Montreal for a long amount of time, could possibly get there. But Guy will be on top for a long time yet. Lafleur is also the Habs' all-time assist leader with 728, 16 ahead of Béliveau. His former teammates Henri Richard, Larry Robinson, and Jacques Lemaire round out the top 5. Again, no active player even within distance. However, Lafleur fell just shy of the all-time goals mark in Habs history, 26, behind the man who has held the mark since the original 6 days, Maurice the Rocket Richard. Due to the controversial circumstances that led to Lafleur's first retirement in 1984, Habs fans were pretty damn upset about this. He never got a chance for the record. He was only 33 at the time he retired in 1984 and certainly could have gotten it. He still finished 11th, however, ahead of Béliveau in 3rd, while teammates Cornway and Schutt rounded out. But he leads in more all-time categories, including 94 game-winning goals, 10 ahead of Rocket Richard. Cornway is his only teammate, joining him on this list in 5th. He's also the all-time leader in power play goals on ice for with a huge 604, 44 up on Larry Robinson. Cornway and Lapointe are 4th and 5th, while we see the first 21st century Habs player on this list, Andrei Markov, in 3rd. During his time in Montreal, the Habs power play was in the top 5 8 times, Lafleur that is, and led the league twice. Lafleur hits the top 5 in other categories as well in Habs history, including 2nd all-time in even strength goals with 376, finishing just short of Rocket Richard's 397, 42 ahead of Béliveau, while Schutt and Henry round out the top 5. On the power play, Lafleur was a beast with 139 extra man goals, well ahead of Hall of Famer Bernie Boom Boom Geoffrion in 5th with 111, just 4 behind Rocket Richard in 3rd, while Cornway is a runner-up to Béliveau. And let's look at plus minus. Lafleur was a mass at plus 470 in his career, with the Habs that is. 3rd best in Habs history, 27 behind teammate and Hall of Famer Serge Savard, while Larry Robinson is far and away the leader, as well as the NHL's all-time leader. But the Habs alone had a plus 692. Lafleur only finished in the minus 4 times in 17 seasons and just twice with the Habs. Schutt and Lapointe round out the list, as the 70s Habs reign supreme here. Lafleur's 16 regular season hat-tricks with the Habs ranks 3rd best of all time. He was just 2 behind Béliveau's mark of 18, while Rocket Richard is far and away the leader. Lafleur is 2nd all-time in Habs history with a massive 1,788 total goals on ice for. Larry Robinson is the all-time leader, far ahead. List is dominated by the Flower and his 70s Habs teammates. And of course, there's offensive point shares with a rating of 101.2, only behind Richard and Béliveau, who is tops. And the only 3 in Habs history with a rating over 100. But we are not done. We have a single season marks to go over. And look at this, it's a clean sweep, as Lafleur has the Habs all-time record for all 5 top spots for points in a season. His career best 136 and 77. A year later, scored 132 and 129 a year after that. His mark of 125 and both 76 and 80 are tied for 4th. This is insanely great. He shares the Habs record with Steve Schutt for goals in a season with 60, which he notched in 1977-78. Schutt's mark happening the year prior, but Lafleur rounds out the rest of the top 5, 56 and 76 and 77, and 53 and 75. Guy, however, just fell 2 assists shy of the Habs all-time single-season mark of assists. Line mate Pete Mahovlich with 82. Lafleur had 80 and 77, but again, he rounds out the top 5. 77 and 79, 75 and 80, and 72 and 78. He does hold another single-season mark with his 13 game-winning goals in 78-79, showing his clutch abilities. He broke a record of 12, shared by Rocket Richard in 1956, and Boom Boom Jeffrey on in 61, teammate Yvan Cournoyer in 1976, and himself also in 76 and 78. Outstanding. He was still in the top 5 in more categories. First, even strength goals in the season. His 45 5-on-5 markers in 78, 42 and 77 ranked second and third respectively, the latter of which tied with Stefan Riche in 1990, while teammate Steve Shutt holds the team record with 52 and 77. Lafleur's 39 and 79 ranks tied for fifth with the great Rocket Richard all the way back, 1945. Lafleur's 18 power play goals in 75-76 is in a three-way tie for fifth best all-time in Habs history, along with Cournoyer, who reached the mark in 71, the year before Lafleur entered the league. He's also the all-time leader with 20 and 67. And Michael Ryder hit the mark with 18 in 2006. The Flower also bolsters the second best, tied for second best that is, plus-minus a plus 89, which shared Steve Shutt. Robinson's plus 120 from that same year is second best in NHL history. Savard's fourth best was also in 77, and only one not part of this group was Brian Engblom, who had the fifth best with plus 78 from 82, but he was their teammate in the late 70s and got himself a couple Stanley Cup rings as well. It's no surprise Larry Robinson owns the top 3 spots for single-season total goals on ice for in Habs history, but Lafleur is just 3 behind Robinson's third spot with 187 in fourth, set back in the 1979-80 season, and his 186 and 78 is tied for fifth. Gila points mark back in 1976. In 1979-80, Lafleur set the team record for power play goals on ice for 70. However, it was passed by just one from Mats Natzl in 86. Then passed by just one, Sheldon Souray in 07. Then a year later, Andrei Markov broke it with one more. Lafleur's mark still, however, sits fourth best all time. And lastly, offensive point shares, a category he's ever present again here, but it's Howie Morenz, the Habs' first true icon, the Stratford Streak, 1928, who still holds the team record with a 14.4, while Lafleur's 13.1 and 78 is second, and his 12.7 and 77 is third. Belovo's 11.5 and 56 followed, and Lafleur rounds it out, his third spot in this list, coming in fifth, 11.1 and 76. And now, we finally come down to it. We look at all the accomplishments of number 10, Lafleur. Wow. Just look at this trophy case. And let's count it up once again. 5-time Stanley Cup champion. First was in his second season of 73, where he really hadn't hit his stride yet. And of course, the infamous 4 straight hover from 76 to 79, where he was probably the biggest star in the league, including winning the Conn Smythe Trophy as playoff MVP in 77. He's a 2-time Hart Trophy winner as league MVP back-to-back in 77 and 78. He's also a finalist in 76 and 79, and got votes in 75, 80, and 81. He was a 3-time winner of the Lester B. Pearson Trophy, today known as the Ted Lindsay Award, as the NHLPA's top choice for MVP, winning it 3 straight seasons from 76, 77, and 78. Those same seasons, he won 3 straight scoring titles, leading the league in points, or to the Art Ross Trophy. He was also in the top 10 in league scoring in 75, 79, and 80. And also, count it up, 6 consecutive first-team All-Star selections at right wing from 75 to 80. Lafleur also played in 6 NHL All-Star games, 4 straight from 75 to 78, then in 1980 and a special selection in his final season in 1991. He led the league in goals in the 77-78 season and was in the top 10 in 75, 76, 77, 79, and 80. Led the league in assists in 77 and was again top 10, 75, 76, 78, 79, and 80. Led the league in even strength goals twice in 75 and 78 and was in the top 10, 76, 77, 79, and 80. Led the league in game-winning goals 4 times, 75, 76, 78, and 79, top 10 in 73, 77, 80, and 81. Led the league in plus-minus in 78, was in the top 10 3 years straight from 75 to 77, and again in 79 and 80. He led the league in total goals on ice for in 1980. It was in the top 10 the 5 prior seasons before that. Lafleur also led the league in offensive point shares 3 years straight from 76 to 78, and was top 10 in 75, 79, and 80. Power play goals was actually one of the few categories Lafleur never led the league in, but he made the top 10 in those 6 straight dominant seasons from 75 to 80. He's also top 10 in power play goals on ice for 4 times, 76, 78, 79, and 80. Lafleur also made the top 10 in shooting percentage twice in 75 and 77. Speaking of other awards, he was a finalist for the Lady Byng Trophy 3 times, 76, 77, and 80. He got votes in 75, 79, 81, 82, 89, and 90. Also, his postseason play was off the charts, 134 points in the 120 playoff games, leading the playoffs in scoring 3 straight seasons from 77 and 79. Holds Canadians' franchise record for all-time points, assists, game-winning goals, power play goals on ice for. He also holds the Habs' all-time franchise record in the single season for points, goals, and game-winning goals. 7 Habs records, and that is a lot considering the history of great players they've had. Also, he was a 7-time winner for the Habs in a team award, recipient of the Molson Cup, which was awarded to each Canadian-based franchise for the most end-of-game 3-star selection points by the end of the regular season. Lafleur won it 75 to 80, 6 straight times, and again in 82. And internationally, he won the first ever Canada Cup as part of one of the greatest teams ever put together. Team Canada in 76 was the runner-up in 81 for that same championship, played in the 81 World Championships, and represented the NHL All-Stars in the Challenge Cup against the Slovenia team in 79. Guy Lafleur's number 10 was retired by the Habs during the same season he actually retired, being honored on February 16, 1985, just under 3 months after his last game for the Habs. And at that time, he was only the 5th Montreal player to receive that honor. In 1988, in his first year of eligibility, he was enshrined to the Hockey Hall of Fame. And in 2017, was named as one of the 100 greatest players in NHL history. Once again, count it up. 560 goals, 793 assists, 1,353 points, 1,126 games, and a career plus 446, 11th all-time in NHL history. On top of that, he ingrained his legacy for a team that has had its fair share, a plethora of legends and icons, and he made himself one of them. It's one of those prolific players, not just in Habs history, but in the history of the NHL. The Flower's legacy forever blooms in Montreal. And that does it for our final look at Guy Lafleur's career numbers. We'll be back with an episode of Anatomy of a Season next on this channel. Until then, please like and share the video, subscribe to the channel, and even suggest a player bio series for me in the comments. Until next time, I'll see ya.